Is everyone having a good time? Can I see a few woo, 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 woo? There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm just trying to get you guys fired up because I know we just had lunch, and if you're like me, you're starting to get a little lethargic and maybe nap time. But no, I need you guys fired up because we've got a great speaker here today. And to help get you fired up, I'm not as good as rapper as Mr. Aldrin here is. I get to go to a Snoop Dogg concert. Mr. Aldrin gets to rap with Snoop Dogg. So, but I have prepared a short rap. Do we have a human beatbox in the room by any chance? Do we have any human beatboxes? How good are you? All right, well then you want to give it a shot? All right, come on. I basically innate a boom, cha-dum, boom, cha-dum, boom, cha-dum kind of beat, okay?
Okay.
Well, I need to get in there too. Well, I used to be a DJ, now I'm an MC, holding down this luncheon at the ISDC. We got a great program for you here today, so open up your ears to what I got to say. We're talking about the moon since it's almost June. We've been there before and we're headed back soon. Where's Lane? Oh. Though breccia be strewn, a new home will be hewn, soon life will festoon for humanity's boon to the universe attune, and the Martians lampoon. Her praises I will croon like an OCD loon. I'm talking about the moon, smooth as a prune, for this awkward white boy tune. So, completely made up. So, but we're not here to listen to rap music. We are here to listen to a gentleman by the name of Bob Richards. Now, I first heard about Bob Richards in 1999 when I was a U.S. delegate to the Space Generation Forum at NewSpace 3 in Vienna. An absolutely awesome experience. You guys need to check out because most of the younger space leaders were at that conference. So if you want a list of who the future is, look at the SGF list. After that conference, I ended up going to International Space University for a master's degree in space studies. Who started ISU, or it was one of the folks that started ISU? That would be Bob Richards. So, but that wasn't his first achievement in space education. He actually started about 4 or 5 years before that with an organization called Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, which is still around today. I was lucky enough to speak at their Space Vision conference this last November, and they are growing again, and I'm trying to get a chapter down in Dallas, Texas. But again, Bob Richards was one of the initiators of that. He's done many things since ISU. He's helped found Singularity University up at NASA Ames, and currently is an entrepreneur. He is a serial entrepreneur. He's working with Moon Express up in San Francisco, right? At NASA Ames. So we are kind of a study in contrasts, so to speak. We've been compared to, if Ken were born on the moon, Bob would be born on Earth. So come on up, Bob. No, well, and then you'll get the joke. You'll get it in just a second. So here's our Earthling, Bob Richards, to give us our presentation on pioneering the lunar frontier.
Ken. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, everyone. Thanks. So if you want to understand a speaker's nightmare, it would be sandwiched between the beatbox lunar rap song by Ken and speaking in front of Buzz Aldrin about the moon. And so perhaps you'll forgive me if I describe the next 30 minutes or so as a journey for all of us, because I have no idea what I'm going to say, but I hope I have something that contributes to your thought process about how important it is of what we're all gathered at this conference to do, ultimately to expand human presence to the moon, to Mars, and the entire solar system and beyond. It's about settlement. It's about going, not just boldly going, like Buzz did, but boldly staying. And today I'm going to talk to you. Many things, of course, are crossing my mind right now. But one of them is, what are the next steps for humanity? When I say the juxtaposition really is, I really do care about humanity taking the next steps. The question is, that really takes all my time these days, is how do we do so in a sustainable way that has the right public-private partnership between the private sector and the government sector? So going back, when I say we have to go back to the moon, I don't mean replicating what Buzz did and the US did. I'm talking about going back to the moon with using the moon as international diplomacy and a place for commerce, a place where we can actually expand Earth's economic sphere. I was lucky enough to be involved in a robotic Mars mission in 2007, the Phoenix Mars Lander. And I was mentored by Carl Sagan, so Mars is absolutely on my mind and one of my biggest inspirations. But from a commercial perspective, what are the steps to move Earth's economic sphere outward? You know, in the 1,000 years ago, 25 miles used to be about the economic sphere. You know, it was hard to do commerce beyond 25 miles. You could walk there, you could ride there, but by the end of the day, you had to come back again. So it was really hard to have that commerce. And then, you know, 2,500 miles with the introduction of technology, planes and trains, became a good economic sphere. You could, for those of us unlucky enough to be in the priority line at airports, you could fly and do business and come back in the same day. And then another order of magnitude happened. 25,000 miles became the economic sphere. About $2 billion worth of revenue flows through geosynchronous orbit. And then what's next? Well, another order of magnitude from there is 250,000 miles. That happens to be where the moon is. So if what I'm describing here is not a linear system, it's an exponential system. Beyond that, 250 million miles is about the extent of how far Mars is away from Earth at the largest point. And then another order of magnitude is the solar system, and a couple of order of magnitudes beyond that is the nearest star. So as we grow as a species, what I'm trying to weave into this discussion is not just to think about what I'm going to talk about in a linear way. You know, where were we 40 years ago? Where will we be 40 years from now? But think in an exponential way. And this is what we teach at Singularity University. This is about the underlying fabric of society today as being completely influenced by exponential forces that the human brain is just not used to. We are organized and designed to think in linear fashions. That tiger is there, that tree is there, I can get there. Right? But what is happening to us is that billion-dollar companies and organizations are coming out of nowhere and collapsing. Why? Because of the exponential forces on us. It's not just Moore's law affecting the amount of information on a chip, but all technology that is based on it. Biotechnology, AI, robotics, all of this is creating a planetary renaissance. And we will need resources as we grow as a civilization. So with that introduction, please think in an exponential way when I ask you the question, where will we be in 2050? Where do you want to be in 2050? The reason I chose 2050, kind of 40 years from now, who here in the room is under 30? Can you please stand up? Great. Under 30, okay? So anybody who has gray or no hair doesn't need to stand up. Thank you, guys and girls. So think, guys, think about 2050, 40 years. This is kind of where you're going to be by traditional standards, kind of midway in your career. By exponential singularity university thinking, you may be about 10% through your normal lifespan by that point. But where do you want the world to be? Do you want us to be a species that is contained to this world, dealing with our mortal problems of scarce resources and being cruel to one another, constrained to this planetary biosphere? Or will we have become more in the O'Neillian sense, citizens of space, where we actually have civilizations and industry in space, like many of us have been dreaming about? Will we have reached Mars, like Buzz is teaching us we need to do, and set up a civilization there so we truly are a multi-word species? Will we have reached the other planets? Will you guys have taken us to those outer planets that are sources of inspiration and science and knowledge and things that we have yet to discover? Or will we, by doing so, have become part of an intergalactic civilization, this encyclopedia galactica that Carl Sagan used to describe, where we find out that we're not alone, that life is actually ubiquitous in the universe and a rule of nature rather than an accident. Well, whatever that future is, it starts here. Where we are on planet Earth, as far as we know, the only place in the universe where intelligent civilization has evolved. We have at least one example, and although there's tons of evidence growing every day that there are so many thousands, millions, perhaps billions of Earth-like planets in our galaxy and other galaxies, today we don't have the evidence yet that life can evolve spontaneously or by accident and survive to the point and evolve to the point that we can ask these questions. We are the only example. But one of the unique things that the space program has given us, the space program, the world, what humans have done in space, and Buzz in particular, and his colleagues, is provide us a perspective on Earth. And to truly understand where we are, you have to think of Earth like this, as it disappears under your thumb and becomes, as Carl described it, a pale blue dot. Amidst the floating in a sunbeam, where everything that you know, all your love, all your hate, every war, every achievement in the history of humanity is located on that one little pixel, which in itself becomes lost with other planets, in other galaxies, and we become humble. And astronomy is a very humbling experience. So is space itself. As we in the commercial space sector think about how can we contribute to this enormous adventure of humanity, there's not much room for arrogance. Nobody knows the actual model or the real. We're all trying different models. If you don't know what humility is when you start a commercial space company, you will certainly learn it along the way, or when it ends. But it's in this context, as we come back closer to the place we know and we call home, this Earth. Now, it has this, did you sense that familiarity, that, wow, we're back home? Well, how do we get off the Earth, and how do we become the multi-world species that we need to be to prevent ourselves from being subject to that single point of failure that we all know about? We were reminded very dramatically, and my friend Peter Diamandis, I don't know how he arranged that great public relations event of not one, but two asteroids flying by Earth, waking us up, saying that, sometimes nature comes to us. It's kind of nature's way of saying, so how's that space program going? Which the dinosaurs didn't have, by the way. What are the commercial reasons? Is there a business case or a business plan for moving off the planet, and what would that look like? Should it be direct to Mars? Should it be going to mine the asteroids? Should it be building industries in space? Should it be going to the moon? Or is it an ecosystem? And I won't say it, Rick, but that's the subject of your talk tonight, how it all fits together. And I wouldn't miss Rick talking about gluing all of this amazing fabric that we're knitting together into one big picture. But what I'm focused on right now is a component of this picture, which is about resources. It's no matter what we want to do as a species, as we are biological and eventually silicon biological type creatures, Homo sapiens that will eventually be our descendants, we need the resources that come to us from space. And the eons of bombardment by comets and asteroids have given us resources on Earth that we mine every day. Actually, we mine just the minute remnants that are left near the surface of the Earth. After the early history of the Earth, most of the value kind of sunk. But as we're just learning more about the bombardment periods of the solar system, that stuff was happening to the moon too, right? So those craters that we see, they're the battle scars of these early bombardment periods. So it happened there too, but there's a difference, and the difference is there's even though there's a common heritage and history between the Earth, Moon, and they are sister worlds and had a common origin, with an interloper that came in and inspired the divergence. The asteroids and the comets did create resources on the moon too. The difference is that the moon cooled a little bit faster. So as many of you might have read in Dennis Wingo's book, Moonrush, the speculation is that there are certain velocities that shattered, that pulverized, and that spread ubiquitously the resources of asteroids all around the moon. So, in essence, the moon has been an aggregator of asteroid resources for billions of years. So in Moon Express's view, and again, this is not an arrogant business case, this is a business case that we have chosen, and there are others, and we have other entrepreneurs in the audience who are using different strategies, but it's all about space resources. Moon Express believes that the asteroids that are accessible on the moon, the remnants of those collisions, are the place to go for resources. We've mapped it very well, thanks to great explorers and our robots, and particularly in the last 10 years, terabytes of information. We're just scratching the surface of understanding, have revealed a world that is rich in usable resources. The question is, are they economical? Can you actually bring them back or use them in space? But it's well sampled. We'll go back to the surface of the moon with our robots and eventually humans again, and we'll get those ground truths of where we want to go. The difference is, okay, so one of the points is, what is the inspiration? What is your resource of choice? That you believe makes it worthwhile. Some people, Jack Schmidt in particular, say it's the helium-3. Okay, I don't care what the spice is. You want it nickel, you want it to be platinum group metals, you want it to be helium-3, you want it to be the unobtainium, and I think it's more like the unobtainium. I think it's the stuff we haven't discovered yet that'll actually be the killer app of economical resources of the moon. But in every case, it's the water on the moon that actually creates the economic argument. It's that H2O that can be differentiated to support fueling and rocket fuel that actually creates the economic argument that you don't have to take all the fuel with you. If there's a platinum mountain on the moon right now and we knew all about it, I don't know until either physics changes or our rocket or our propulsion technology changes, we can't make that economically viable to bring back. Right? But by learning how to use the water, process the water, and create the fuel depots and stations that create the economics to bring things either back to Earth for our own economy or the economies in space, and for me to be a supplier to Rick's company, we need to learn how to do that. So, welcome to the Moonrush. I guess what I'm describing is we have a vast opportunity here, and we've only scratched the surface of it. Moon Express and our colleagues are looking at the moon as entrepreneurs. It's a little different way of looking at the moon than we've looked at it for the last 40 years. A destination for political programs, a scientific Rosetta Stone, all these things are great about the moon, but Moon Express is looking at the moon as entrepreneurs. How can we economically liberate those resources in the moon for the benefit of humanity, both here on Earth and our future in space? That's the biggest question we have. So welcome to Moon Express. I want to give you a little bit of information about how we believe we can do this, and it's all about baby steps. So it's not about let's wait till we have that that $1 billion in our bank and start. It's about what do we do now, and I gave a talk yesterday, which was the context was the business case for space, and I let everybody in on this little secret that I have of how you do business in space. What's the secret to business in space? Well, I'm going to let you guys in on it as well. What you spend has to be less than what you make. And I just say, for those under 30, I just saved you an MBA program, okay? So what you spend has to be less than what you make. So it's about finding the early customers, right? For, it's a market, identify a market, find the early customers. They prove whether it's worthwhile or not because they will give you the money to do the things you say you're going to do. Part of the challenge of being an entrepreneur is to learn how to try to align those customers so they pay you things before your expenses come due, right? That's called cash flow. So if you can do that, that's great. If your revenues always outpace your expenses, that's a good day. I mean, you don't have to sell any of your company and everything's good. You don't have to ask for loans at the bank. You don't have to beg your friends and family for money. You don't have to go to talk to VCs. It's all a good day. But I haven't seen a case, especially in space, where that's totally possible. So the question is, how do you line them up? How do you minimize the distance between the revenues and the expenses, which creates a negative cash flow, which has to be satisfied in some way. And because we're talking space, it's still relatively expensive. Usually credit cards won't cover it. So you have to go to friends and family, or you have to go to investors. In the case of Moon Express, we're fortunate to have a number of investors that are helping put the risk money up front to reach those revenues. The revenues, in our case, we do have customers. We are proud that NASA is one of our customers. NASA has, I was hearing people talk about the Commercial Orbital Transportation Services system, the COTS program. Companies like SpaceX and Orbital Sciences are participating in that. And it's a wonderful model, in my view, where the taxpayer is not actually on the hook. It's the investor, the entrepreneur, who's on the hook, and only for success do they get paid. So there's a program that NASA has instituted, started in 2010. Moon Express was one of the contract recipients. It's a 4-letter acronym, so it's not even 3. It's ILDD. It's Innovative Lunar Demonstrations Data Program. But it's like a lunar COTS. It's the extension of NASA will buy data from us as we execute our plans and our missions. Only after we've achieved those milestones we say that we can do. So it's not a forward funding, it's an after funding. The investor is still on risk. We're also very pleased that Google is one of our customers through the management of the X Prize Foundation, which offered the first X Prize for space, the Ansari X Prize, and the flight of Spaceship One in 2004 that captured our imaginations and led rise to a new industry of personal spaceflight. The next prize is a $30 million prize offered by Google for the first private team, company, organization to reach the moon with a robotic explorer, travel 500 meters in some way, and send high-definition video and images back to Earth. They want data. Data, data. What our customers are telling us right now is that size doesn't matter. They just want the data. They want the information. So this allows innovative ideas for small robotic systems that can deliver punch above their weight and deliver vast amounts of data back to Earth that we can monetize. We're also delivering, it's always good when you can send bits and you can monetize bits. Sending the atoms is harder because it's very expensive to get atoms down to the moon. But we're sending atoms too. We have payloads, people who are paying us to deliver telescopes to the moon, retroreflectors, all these great ideas of what we can do down on the lunar surface. But the big pitch, that's the solution to our first mission. We have enough customers to actually make the business case close for first mission, and it will be a profitable first mission. But the big picture is what then? If you look at what we're looking at, it's about the early days of exploration, learning how to get to the moon with a private company. And if you came to Moon Express, you'd find about 30 people. It's not 300. It might be 50 by the time we're actually landing on the moon, but it's a small team doing what superpowers kind of did before. Through the advantage, again, remember exponential technology. We're able to shrink avionics, electronics. Everything is dematerializing into bits. And that allows us to create small, very smart spacecraft that are able to do things that you couldn't do even 5 or 10 years ago. But in the next decade, it's about prospering from the resources of the moon and eventually about securing our future as a species. And sooner or later, the Earth is going to have another really bad day. And likely that day isn't going to come next Tuesday, but it could. So it just makes sense, and it's just responsible as a species to put a little bit of effort, a little bit of money, a little bit of an insurance policy in place that we will become a multi-world species and not subject to this one bad day event. So the investors in Moon Express believe in the value of the moon. Massive economic opportunity. When you're thinking in these exponential terms, we're talking about what is a world worth? What is it worth to open up a whole new 8th continent of planet Earth? And we're talking about evolving the economic sphere again. So it's not just about the value of the resources, but of all of the industries and the ecosystem of industries that will evolve out of it. What gives us the opportunity as entrepreneurs is that even though we're in a realm of uncertainty here in the United States, and I can tell you the situation is no better in Canada, we entrepreneurs believe that that's an opportunity for certainty to say this is where we're going to come in with an answer, and we're going to start developing products and services that we believe will be of value not just to governments but to private sector customers. We believe that everything is aligning, the planets are aligning as a new global moon race is arising. The moon is becoming important. The ultimate plan of going to Mars is certainly in my heart, But I do believe that the moon is a great first economic step towards monetizing and settling the entire solar system. Many countries are going to the moon for the first time. And I would hope I'm in agreement with people like Buzz that the U.S. doesn't have to respond by saying, we're going to do that too. It's a new opportunity for economics and international partnerships to happen. And through public-private partnerships and a proper relationship between private sector companies like Moon Express and others, and NASA and other space agencies, to go to the moon in the right way that affords us not just sustainability, but economic growth. So we're seeing the emergence of commercial lunar. The extension, as I mentioned, of the commercial model of partnerships of delivering cargo, eventually humans. The early markets for Moon Express are in this delivery mechanism: transportation, communications, delivery of stuff. Kind of the Lunex, the FedEx model to the moon, which will be okay for the first few missions, maybe even 5. It's something that gets us going. It's the on-ramp to that economic highway, that superhighway that we're trying to reach, that has very large or very high points of entry as far as the money it costs to do it, but finding these lower cost entry points, these on-ramps, are really important. One of our holy grails is after we learn how to land and then operate on the surface, we want to bring some stuff back. That's ours. I mean, we want to bring back I don't care if it's a hunk of platinum, just moon dust will do. And I think that's really, really going to be an important thing for us as a company to bring back for scientific exploration, for novelty and commercial purposes. But that sample return is going to be very important to us. There are billions of dollars in today's moon markets. There's nascent science that needs to be done. Tons of payloads and scientific ideas. There's no limit to the amount of lunar scientists that have things that they want to do on the moon. And delivering those instruments there in cooperation with NASA and commercial entities is monetizable in the short term. Returning samples and then providing strategic access to the lunar surface. This is the short-term plan for Moon Express. Long-term markets, the first trillionaires will be made in space. Whether those are people being entrepreneurs on and around the moon, or with asteroids or deep space industries. I guess that's an actual company. That's a good name for a company, Rick. It's in the trillions, right? This is a planetary renaissance that is going to happen as we move out into space. And nothing's really fun unless people are involved. And I'm often asked, what's the balance? Is it machines or is it humans? Well, the answer in the short term and the long term is it's both. I mean, use machines, use robots where it's logical to do so, and humans need to follow. In the long future, but in the singularity realm, maybe in the next 100 years, we're merging with our technology, and it's these Homo spacians, the merger of our humanity and our machines that will actually eventually be the ones that go out. So I'll pass over this slide because it'll be controversial with many people. But as far as the technology goes, like any innovative company, it's about disruptive technology. What is Moon Express doing? That's like what my other competitors are doing. It's using disruptive technologies. That means technologies that are so innovative that it changes the game of what you're trying to do. You still have, the physics hasn't changed, so you have to still live within the bounds of physics. But in the area of electronics and avionics and propulsion, the availability of commercial launchers and landing technology that Moon Express is developing, this is changing the game. It's providing new opportunities. We're also very pleased, though, it's not just innovation of the new, it's learning from experience. And we're very pleased that NASA is a partner in 2 ways. I've mentioned that NASA is a customer, and that's a great way to have NASA. But they're also a partner where we've entered into a contract. It's called a Reimbursable Space Act Agreement. We're located up in NASA Ames, just up in Silicon Valley. And the reimbursable part of the Space Act Agreement means that we are paying NASA. It's kind of an inversion of the natural order of things. We pay NASA for access to their expertise, to technology, and we pick and choose what we think fits in with our commercial plan. And NASA has been absolutely fantastic about helping us learn how to do robotic landing missions. And we are embracing a very smart design called a commercial spacecraft bus that was innovated by Pete Warden and his team up at NASA Ames. Here it is. Well, this is actually an early prototype version. In about 2007, 2008, NASA Ames began the development of this little robotic creature, which was designed to be a low-cost lunar lander or a lunar orbiter. It's a modular, flexible common spacecraft bus. Not a sense of scale here, but two of us could put our arms around it. It's smaller than these tables. It's not that big. It was in 2009 that NASA Ames was awarded an orbiter mission based on this technology called LADEE. And that is in integration right now. It's going to be going to the launch facility at Wallops later this summer, launching later this year. That'll be the next orbiter mission to the moon, the NASA LADEE mission. Lunar Atmospheric Dust Environment Explorer. Moon Express, with that commercial contract, is creating the lander version of that the LANDEE version of that spacecraft. About 60 or 70% of the technology probably overlaps, the structures, the avionics, the propulsion, but what we're innovating, what we're investing in is the landing segment. It's the propulsion, particularly the software. And half the Moonix team is our software engineers, basically. So, to them, the hardware is just what you put software in. And this particular test vehicle lives in a building next door to our facilities at NASA Ames. We fly it in the air. It uses cold gas. That's a fancy term for air. As its propulsion that actually replicates the propulsive characteristics of the eventual engines, so we can iterate very safely and many times a day. And even though we only fly for about 8 seconds at a time, that's forever for a computer program. And we can iterate and develop our computer programs, our software, our algorithms, our GNC, guidance, navigation, control, over and over with this test platform that's been very useful to us. In this facility, we call it Mission Control. It used to be an old paint shop at NASA Ames. Some of you, I think, have been there. But it's been converted to this test facility that we enjoy occupation of through the contracts that we have. And this is a picture of the LADEE spacecraft a few months ago in its integration in the clean room at NASA Ames. And if you can see the top, it's on its side, right? So on the right-hand side, you kind of see the hexagonal part, the first half of it. If you look back at this, go back to this one. See that? Okay, so put that on its side and add 2 more segments. Could you see it? So it's really the same spacecraft, very modular. And in this image, you see LADEE spacecraft with its solar cells, looking more like a spacecraft, getting ready for launch. When it flies to the moon later this year, we, Moon Express, will be learning a lot about how the spacecraft operates. So we'll be able to apply that knowledge back to our iterative development of the lander version, and then be able to play that back to NASA. So there's a mutual value proposition happening where the commercial investment is actually informing NASA back on its own design. And if it all works, we will be able to offer these landers on a continuing basis at a fraction of the cost to the lunar surface than NASA would be able to do itself by mounting an entire mission. Instead of flying missions to the moon, NASA and others can fly payloads to the moon. So it's like a rideshare. Kind of the way that I got here. I didn't buy a plane and fly it and throw it away when I got here. I shared the ride with 300 of my friends and flew down here on a rideshare basis, and it cost a couple $100, not a couple $1 million. And that's the same strategy for sending payloads to the lunar surface in a rideshare, like a condominium capacity. When we land on the moon, and we want to land on the moon before the end of 2015, that's currently the expiry of one of our customers' offers, which is Google. The $30 million prize expires at the end of 2015, as does the NASA LDD contract. So Moon Express is focused on this landing on the moon before the end of 2015, which means that's not that far away in space program standards, about 30 months, 30 months. So later this year, if you stay tuned, you'll be seeing some exciting revelations from Moon Express. We haven't been able to be completely open about our technical milestones yet, but we will be later this year. And a lot of people ask me, well, do you have a rocket yet? You know, well, I've been coy about that. I've said we have arrangements. But it's part of it is because it's not really the right question yet. It'll be a more relevant question 6 months from now, or certainly a year from now. Do you have a rocket yet? Because the lead time for a rocket, typically about 2 years, right? So if you want to be flying at the end of 2015, by the end of 2013, you should have kind of a rocket, certainly some way into 2014. What the real question is, or what I would like the real question to be is, how many of those 250,000 hours of real engineering has your company done to build the system that's able to land on the moon? That's a lot of engineering hours. And you can't just buy a lander. You can buy a rocket. That's solved by money. You can't buy a lander. You have to engineer it. You have to create it. That's what Moon Express is doing. We're focused on creating the last mile solution to getting the surface of the moon. The reason we're able to do this is we got fantastic people. So, I asked the under 30s to stand up. If you go to Moon Express, we have this ratio we call the O to P ratio, the Obi-Wan to Padawan ratio. It's about 3 to 1. So for every gray hair or no hair veteran that we have on the team, we have about 3 under 30s, those 20-somethings that created that program. And that's what built NASA, right, back in the 60s. It was the energy of the youth that don't want to take no for an answer, that ask very annoying questions that often are the right ones. And you slide pizza under the door at night and they just keep working. It's just great. You come back the next day and ask what you've done. So that's really the ratio we have. We have a great executive team. I would not have been able to start Moon Express without my great co-founders, Naveen Jain and Barney Pell. Every good commercial space company needs a billionaire. Naveen is that to me, and Barney has been very successful in his entrepreneurial ventures, who became, went from NASA Ames head of the AI group to a very successful Silicon Valley entrepreneur. And between the two of them, I've learned so much, and we've frameworked Moon Express around a Silicon Valley model. That's what we're following. Not the only way, as I remember what I said, it's not the only business model, but it's the one that we are dedicated to. Is the right amount of money at the right time to get the company through milestones of technology development, followed by more money, climbing the ladder of innovation to the point that you land on the moon and your company valuation rises and your revenues hopefully keep pace. But it's not possible without veteran technical leads. We're able to attract some of the best people in the space industry these are people that have sold homes and uprooted their families and changed schools of the kids and driven across the country. I was talking to my friends this morning about the story of the bacon and the eggs. The ingredients are really important, but the chicken makes a contribution, but the pig is committed, right? So we have very committed people at Moon Express. People like Tim Pickens, who has recently joined us, who is the propulsion lead for Spaceship One, you might remember. He's the one that created those engines that allowed Spaceship One and Burt Rutan to win the X Prize in 2004. He's now our chief propulsion engineer, doing really exciting things that you'll see a little later this year. People like Steve Bailey, who have done more missions than I've had cars in my life, and Mars, Moon, everything. People like Jim Cady, who is the lead GNC engineer for both the New Horizons mission on its way to Pluto right now, and Messenger, which is already on circling Mercury, including, if you guys know, the Marshall Mighty Eagle lander that flies in the air. Have you seen those? Jim was on that as well. Fantastic veteran team. But what makes the company really exciting every day and just a pleasure to get to work are our moon hackers, right? These lunar code boys and code girls that are creating the software and the engineering and the innovation that's really driving our company forward. They are annoying because sometimes they're so right. Yeah, and they, together we're going to the moon. It's an exciting day. I just, wake up and I just can't believe we're living in this era where my friends are building asteroid companies and rockets and spaceships and going out to mine, in deep space mining industries, and we're living this dream that we've had for the last 30 years of it all coming together. So it's a fantastic place to be. It's a time we're just at the outset of the era where humanity is really becoming that spacefaring species. It's a fantastic time to be here. ISDC, I think, helps bring this all together in this collision of technology and people and enthusiasts. And it's great to be able to spend a few minutes with you today talking about my little corner of making this future happen. Thank you very much. I don't really know if we have time for questions, but do we have any? I'm going to, oh, okay.
How many U.S. orbiters are around the moon right now?
How many U.S. orbiters are around the moon right now? I'm not sure if that's a trick question.
No,
The Lunar Reconnaissance, the Lunar Reconnaissance orbiter is at the moon right now. And that's been there for about 3 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's delivering more data than all the lunar orbiters of all the countries combined. It's a fabulous instrument that's teaching us so much about the moon. And that will be followed by LADEE. It'll still be so there'll be 2 orbiters on the moon. And then depending on how China executes on its mission, there'll be 1 robotic lander in the moon too. So 3 robots at the moon later this year if all goes well. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I had to step out briefly to put out a little fire, but I may have missed this part, but I'm really curious. What is the cost, average cost per mission, and where do you achieve break even in your spreadsheets?
There's an embarrassing business question. No, I actually want to be honest about this. I used to be worried that, so first of all, to have a commercial business in space, having an order of magnitude less than the government cost is kind of a good idea. It's a good metric. So I used to be worried that a commercial robotic mission to the moon might cost as much as $100 million. You know, when you look at the value of the Google and X Prize, $30 million, it is designed to be a fraction thereof of the cost of doing it. So it's about the right multiple. Paul Allen put about $30 million into Spaceship One, $10 million prize, kind of a 3 multiple. So you can imagine kind of a $50 to $100 million price tag for a robotic mission would be about the right thing. I used to believe it was at the outside of that envelope. I'm now believing that it's on the inside of that envelope. So $50 million, I think, is the magic number. And if we can possibly do that, then our investors will have a real happy day on our first mission. And it'll lead the way to further economic value.
Just a quick follow-up. Are you planning to stay private or go public at some point?
Are we planning to stay private or go public? I don't know what the future holds there. I do know that what SpaceX does is going to be a real vanguard. So the likely IPO of SpaceX in its future, is going to do incredible things to those of us who follow in those footsteps. So, whether there's an exit at all for our investors is a question. We might just keep going, and that's part of the strategy. Is that in some ways, you make it up as you go along, and you're not locked and loaded on any one particular idea. Thanks. Yes, sir.
Do you foresee any cooperation between the asteroid capture program plan and your efforts?
I think there's convergence in the future in all of this. It's just a great time I don't know. There should be convergence. I'm trying to popularize the notion that the moon is a near-Earth object. And so that's where I am, and I just applaud every other effort, and particularly all my friends that are trying to do this. And there's got to be a convergence out there. I just hope it all works. Yes, sir.
Do you use any technologies of the Mars rovers like Curiosity or Spirit or Opportunity?
So do we use any technology from the Mars rovers? I've never heard that question, but the answer is yes. 3 people on our engineering team actually were involved in those rovers, and we are instituting some of the best innovations in those rovers for shrinking avionics. Even wiring is a problem in space. Wires are heavy, right? So yes, we are using some of those technologies, but we're innovating a lot more. Yes, sir.
With all the developments in your landers, is there still a need to have a Neil Armstrong there at the last minute of the ride?
So does a human have to be in the loop in the last few seconds of landing? After my first mission, I might be saying, damn, I wish there was a human in the loop. But the whole idea is that you can't have, really, in those final moments. The lander has to have the sensors and the intelligence to make its own decisions. In the early missions, so this is the hazard avoidance question, and I've worked on the hazard avoidance problem for a long time now. The way we're going to avoid the hazard avoidance question in the first mission, in order to keep it as simple as possible, is not to go to an area that there are hazards. But in order to go to more interesting areas of the moon, whether you're going to the poles or other valuable areas, you have to solve that problem. And our engineers are working on very innovative solutions to that. Particularly, that's an area where this dematerialization is happening, where we can actually do processing of images rather than hardcore using hardware and massive instruments and sensors to do it. So that's an area that is being innovated very well. Yes.
I'm wondering, with the LADEE structure you showed, is that being set up for mass production purposes, so you could have follow-on missions in the loop?
Sure, absolutely. So is the LADEE structure being set up for mass production? I want to see kind of the assembly line of landers, right? And this is part of the big advantage is instead of doing one-off, we can go to all the suppliers and say, hey, keep the button pressed there and do us like 3 or 4 more copies. And of course, you get the economy of scale with that. So what's the balance of having enough in the pipeline and too many that they're just sitting so long that they're become obsolete? So it's 3 or 4 in the mix in the pipeline, I think is the right number. Is that good enough? Thank you very much, everyone.